Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. You are welcome to today's episode of Public Health in Real Life, a platform where we hope to highlight key global health issues, celebrate unsung heroes and people working on the field, and inspire the next generation of leaders. Today, we take a slightly different spin where Ashwin and I talk about the recently released UN climate report. The UN IPCC climate report that was released this week sounded what the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres called a code red for humanity. We are seeing unusual patterns and extreme weather changes, floods in China, Germany, Nigeria, heat waves in Canada, increased wildfires in the US, specifically in California, and then also in Turkey, just to name a few. We've also seen decreased rainfall in the Horn of Africa in the last couple of years. This UN report summarizes that human activities are unequivocally causing climate change and that the world is likely to hit the 1.5 degrees Celsius warming limit within 20 years. Ashwin, that definitely is an alarming report, and I know we have people on both sides of the divide who believe in human beings being responsible for climate change, and at the same time, climate change being responsible for some of the increasing weather pattern changes that we see. What is your thought on it? I know you're not the expert, but it would be interesting to just hear your own viewpoint on climate change and the environment.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very sad that there are a lot of groups in this world that's having opposing views when it comes to climate change. Maybe not all causes related to climate change might be human influence, but there's a lot that we can do to reverse the impacts that have already been seen in the footprint of this planet. And when you talk about climate change, the IPCC report has identified a couple of areas where climate change is intensifying its effects, namely the water cycle, rainfall patterns, the increased level of droughts around the world. And if you think about even the recent Taliban takeover of Afghanistan, that is also hugely affected by climate's impact on the world. And even we see a lot of coastal areas continuing to see a high sea level rise. All these issues are amplifying the effects of climate change, and that in turn affects how wildlife interacts with each other, and that has an effect on agriculture, which has an effect on public health, occupational health, global health, health equity, and if we even in today in we are in 2021, where we are seeing a significant percentage of vaccination provided to high income population and a low percentage in other countries. And if we think about it, supply chains are strained around the world and manufacturing is strained. As you see, the entire world in 2020 was dependent on India for majority of its medicines, especially the high income countries. The moment the Indian manufacturers had to slow down, it affected the supply chains globally. And we also see the same kind of issue for low and middle income countries as well, which have absolutely no manufacturing capacity to have these vaccinations delivered and dispensed to their populations.
Mhm. That's really insightful, especially as you linked the impact of climate change to supply chains and how, supply chain has been a huge factor in how the world has dealt with this pandemic. There was, still speaking on that temperature thing, there's this aspect of the report I want to highlight, which said, the report says emissions, as I previously said, unequivocally caused by human activities, which have already pushed the average global temperature up 1.1 Celsius from its pre-industrial average, and it says it would have even raised it by 0.5% further. You had mentioned something about the crisis in and the conflict in Afghanistan and a couple of other regions, and it says here that a rise of 1.5 degrees Celsius is generally seen as the most humanity could cope with without suffering widespread economic and social upheaval. And for me, it was really interesting to see that because a lot of times, at least from my own perspective as a global health practitioner, when we talk about climate change, yes, I think of the environment, I think about its impact on health, but I often forget about that economic and social upheaval and unrest that could occur as a result of all of this multitude of factors that we mentioned. So it's really interesting to see how the report highlighted it.
Yeah,
I know a lot of people are on both sides of the divide, but interestingly, some data that was collected a while back, at least from the US perspective, on the populace's awareness of climate change and the impact on the environment today, showed that what the news and the political climate shows isn't necessarily reflected in people's opinion. It
yeah,
actually showed that about 60% of the population believe that climate change is not a hoax, it's real, and it's impacting the environment and things we see.
yeah,
From a low and middle income country perspective, how do you think countries in resource limited settings are addressing, or at least what is their awareness of climate change and its impact?
yeah. Yeah, see, in fact, what we think is in low and middle income countries, there's a lot of industrial wastes that they are dumping into their river. They have a lot of practices that's still going on in these countries that are anti climate, but that's not entirely true. If you look at many of the communities, especially one of the communities we always ignore about in daily conversations is the indigenous communities.
Mm,
And even till date, they are using um, the products that are totally biodegradable, and they're using products that are totally environmentally friendly till date. But now, us putting this veil called modernity, we are using all these single-use plastic uh, bottles or plates or cutleries, and dumping it into the ocean, affecting wildlife, affecting ourselves. These are some areas that we should rather use those kinds of practices to further and increase or amplify the use of bio friendly products and decrease the single use plastics in the long run. And at the same time, when you think about industrial population, the, there's a lot of industries and companies using coal as the major source of running a factory, or other types of non-environmentally friendly um, items to process their supply chains or their value chains. So there's a lot of work to be done in that area. But majority of that work is also driven by high income countries. If you look at it, why is if you look at textile industry, for example, majority of the textiles that are manufactured in Bangladesh or India or China, they are all manufactured for high income countries. And the high income countries have a responsibility to ensure that those countries manufacture their products in the most environmentally friendly way. And at the grassroots level, even us people who live in high income countries, the diaspora population, within the high income consumers, have a responsibility in us to drive those kinds of changes from the grassroots level by demanding the places from which we buy food or we buy textiles ensures that not only environment but the people that work in those factories are humanely and properly treated, and at the end of the day we protect the planet and save um, waterways and other areas.
mm. That's really insightful, Ashwin. And you do bring that great intersectionality between the economy and contribution to climate change, and of course industrial pollutants. One of the one of the criticisms of that move, to at least from the US perspective and a couple of other developed world or high income countries, is when there's that because the Conference of Parties has that target to reduce
Yeah.
greenhouse gas emission and then the impact on the environment, which means moving from fossil fuel dependent economies
Yeah.
and moving largely to a green economy. But as you know, it has become a political issue in certain countries.
Yeah.
So I think the messaging should then be on not what is going to be lost economically by
Yeah.
switching, but
Yeah.
what is going to be lost economically by not switching, and what is likely to be gained economically. The
Yeah.
messaging here in the US at least talks about how many, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of jobs will be added by moving to like a green economy and all. But then you ask yourself again, back to resource limited settings where the technology doesn't even exist. The climate change report and also some of the data from the US shows that household use is the highest contributor, at least from a household perspective, to climate change. Of course, in addition to burning of fossil fuel
Yeah.
cars and other industries. So then it begs the question, how do people from those economies who feel that they have not been the ones that have contributed significantly
Yeah.
to the existential threat that we have now get on that bandwagon, because we have to collectively tackle and address this? What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, absolutely. So in that area, as I said, the work can be done in place. Um, when you talk, there's a quote that says charity begins at home, right?
Mm,
So change needs to begin in our living rooms and in our dining rooms. And even when we bring a lot of guests home, of course, we are living in COVID times, but after the post COVID times, we can encourage and educate our guests during that time by using eco-friendly products. There's nothing wrong in using eco-friendly products. No, nowadays, there's um, the green industry is also coming, has ensured that the prices are not as high as it used to be before, and electric cars are becoming more affordable. And there and government must invest in incentivizing households through tax credits to affordably buy those products. And at the same time, as industries move from fossil fuel dependent factories or industries to green industries, we need to increase the education of people who are going to work in those new factories. So here we in the United States we have a lot of manufacturing jobs. So when you replace those with knowledge based jobs or jobs that's going to have new machinery that's more environmentally friendly, we need to ensure that those people who are going to work in those new factories are trained, are up to speed to operate those uh, new machineries or new products. And so that's also a conversation that's going on in the US government and other governments as well. But moving from fossil industry to fossil fuel based industry to green industry, there's a little bit of educational component there, and investment in that area is critical.
yeah. We have an audience comment here that talks about, that states more awareness might be needed to perform reduce, reuse, recycle, which is a very catchy phrase here in the US. So
Hmm.
media campaigns might have a wide reach in empowering common people to reuse and reduce plastic waste. I do
Yeah.
feel that's very, very important as we speak about awareness on what we can do. To your point earlier, you said charity begins at home. I think it's interesting, though, again, when we talk about that disparity and dichotomy between the resource rich environment or the urban environment and resource limited settings, where you would have to even create systems or build systems that allow for reducing, reusing, recycle. Like you said, for those of us that are diasporans, we live in a system where you put out your trash, you sort out recycle and trash, and then somebody takes it out. You don't necessarily worry about where it goes.
Yeah.
For most of us, where we come from and where our families are from, it's that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So then when you place the responsibility on the individual to, again, charity
Yeah.
begins at home, and the system doesn't exist, it
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily move the needle
Yeah.
to implement that change that we seek.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, we appreciate that comment, Indira, and I guess we would all do everything within our spare. I recently took a course, Climate for Health, and signed up as a Climate for Health ambassador because we haven't really mentioned the impact of climate on health, which we would
Yeah.
address in another interview. But it's physicians, healthcare providers are seeing the impact of a changing
Yeah.
climate on the health of the populace. And this is something that we all need to advocate for, continue to raise awareness on, um, and see what we contribute our own quota to
Yeah.
being the change that we want to see.
Yeah.
Um, so the Conference of Parties meeting is going to be happening in a little less than 3 months in Glasgow. And as you know, the focus is, reducing greenhouse emissions. And it's called COP26, where, world leaders come, issue a memorandum, on that and talk about how they want to implement the UN climate change framework,
Yeah.
and then make a commitment to, again, whatever actions need to be tackled.
Right.
With everything that has happened in the past year, what would you like to what would you like to see clearly highlighted or focused on those meetings?
Yeah. One chief area is having, translating these findings into policies where, national policies or state policies or local policies to reverse the course of, um, trashing everywhere. If you look at low and middle income countries, one of the biggest problems is there is trash everywhere. And if you go ask someone, hey, why do you trash in this place? You're not supposed to trash. Um, the immediate response is that, you know what, even the other guy did that. Or even I once saw a police officer do that. Or I once saw a government official trash here. Or I've seen a rich person walk his dog, which urinated in this particular area. So what's wrong? By changing one person, what are you going to? What changes
Mm,
are going to happen?
mm,
And I don't blame that individual, right? So in those kinds of conferences, it's critical to educate politicians to read reports like this. If you look at the IPCC report that's just out, it was they consulted about a bunch of scientists from multiple countries. So this is one of the unique report that has regional information. This the other reports, the United Nations report, have been mostly published by scientists from high income countries, and they never had regional information. But now it's not like that. They have scientists from Brazil, India, China, Pakistan, Indonesia, Australia, South Sudan, Zambia. So they are able to now provide all they are able to get regional information from multiple continents and regions. Now in this conference, a chief duty is to get commitments from world leaders that they will go back and translate those findings into policies that must not be just a policy that doesn't have funding to enforce it, right? If there is no funding for enforcing it or maintaining that policy, then that's not a policy at all.
mm,
uh, there's the one thing that must be encouraging to us is looking at the past decade, there's a lot of improvements that have been made already in the world. For example, here in Washington, D.C., you need to pay 5 cents for each plastic bag. 5 cents or 10 cents, I'm not totally sure how much that is. It's not a big deal for many people, but it's making people to question again whether they need to use it. In many parts of India, they have stopped using single-use plastics, and people are now using recycling bags or eco-friendly bags. So these are little things that government can do to reverse the course of global warming.
mm.
And what do you think about that particular conference that's coming up?
Oh yeah, I definitely echo all of your thoughts on what should be the focus of that conference. I think for me, like you rightly pointed out, it has historically been, world leaders from high income countries mostly driving the agenda, because whilst there has been that messaging that, the developed world is mostly responsible for a huge proportion of, the pollution and the changes to the climate, they have kind of like set the tone and the pace for those conversations. But I think at this point,
Yeah,
countries, leaders from even low and middle income countries, and you mentioned basic, which is Brazil, South Africa, India, and China. They are a group of countries that have developed, that have created like a committee on ensuring that they also, advocate for increased awareness of and initiate policies that drive changes in climate. So yes, I would want to see a lot of those leaders stepping up
yeah,
to also have, highlights and increase their voices at the table, and then also increase their commitment, because like you mentioned, a policy is only as good as the funding that backs it up. So really ensuring that there's funding available for it. I do know, especially in the midst of a global pandemic and with competing priorities,
yeah,
funding will definitely be, it's going to be tricky to have those conversations on investing in. But I think when the messaging shifts from what could be lost economically and socially from not doing anything to address the impact of climate change, then we might probably see that increased awareness and push towards increased funding for any interventions or initiatives that protect the impact of the climate change, and then what we see now, and global warming in essentially.
okay. So
Um,
yeah, so to discuss further, we will be having Chandra Bhushan on our conversation today. He'll be joining us momentarily, so we ask our um, viewers to hang tight, and he'll be joining us in just a moment. So one moment. Yep, we're back live with Chandra Bhushan. He should be joining us in just a moment. So, yes, Maimun, I totally see that this conference would be a great opportunity moving forward. Um, and the biggest problem with these conferences, though, what I feel is it's not very interactive, where the I personally have not seen a lot of areas where public opinion is taken, or public polls are discussed, or the regular public are invited to these kinds of conferences. And we saw in the World Economic Forum, we saw one of the sessions had Greta Thunberg on it. Um, Hold on just a moment. I think we have Chandra Bhushan also on our call. Just a moment. Hello, Chandra Bhushan. Welcome to the call.
Thank you. Let me just it's fine.
Yep, we are good and we are live.
Sure.
Uh, so, myself and Dr. Maimuna, we were just discussing so far about the new IPCC report from the United Nations, and we were just discussing about how this report has sounded a code red, and this is an opportunity for the whole world to wake up once again and come back with a renewed focus and refreshed focus to implement some changes based on the findings shown in this report. And when we look at the report, we wanted to just begin this conversation with what are the top causes and impacts of climate change. But before then, please allow me to introduce you, Chandra Bhushan. So today in the conversation, we have Chandra Bhushan, who is one of India's foremost environment and climate change experts. He is the president and CEO of the International Forum for Environment, Sustainability and Technology, which is iFOREST. Bhushan has wide ranging research and public policy interests, and he has researched, written, and campaigned for issues ranging from climate change and energy transformation to rights of mining affected people and industrial pollution. He has authored, co authored 20 books and authored, co authored, directed more than 60 reports. He has been conferred with the Ozone Award, which is a partnership award by the United Nations Environment in 2017, for his contribution towards the training of the Kigali Amendments to the Montreal Protocol. Bhushan advises a range of institutions worldwide. He was the co-chair of the Technical Advisory Committee of Global Reporting Initiative, which came out with the very first triple bottom line reporting framework. He is an expert member for BASIC, which is Brazil, South Africa, India, China group of countries on climate change. Uh, Chandra Bhushan, welcome to the program.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So we would like to begin the conversation. I also have my co-host Maimuna. Maimuna, welcome to the program as well. We
Thank you,
can.
Ashwin, and we're glad to have you, Chandra.
Thank you.
So, Chandra, we would like to begin with. You might have seen the IPCC report, and we would like to start with the top causes and impacts of climate change on the environment, and are all these human influenced?
Well, this IPCC report is extremely important. These reports have been coming out for the last 30 years now. And this is the sixth IPCC report. In fact, this is the first part of the big report that will be released over the next few months. So this is a very important report. This is the first part, which is a physical science basis for climate change. So this report essentially gives you the science behind the climate change. And the report is emphatic in establishing that global warming that is happening is because of us. The extreme weather events that we are witnessing across the world, from wildfire in Greece to California to floods and extreme rainfall in China and India to cyclones in Arabian Sea, they all can be linked to global warming and therefore to human interference in our climatic system. So this is an extremely important report. My hope is that the policymakers and businesses will take extreme note of this report, not just note of this report. They have to
Yeah,
be extremely serious about this issue because climate change now threatens the
yeah,
very basis of our existence. So, from that perspective, an extremely, extremely important report.
yeah. But has there been changes in the past that has been taken by world leaders based on findings of these previous reports? Can we link policy changes to findings of these reports in the past?
Yes, there are changes happening, but those changes are slow and not good enough.
Yeah,
Of course, there are changes happening in the economy. Renewable energy is now real. In
yeah,
fact, In India, renewable energy is now cheaper than coal-based power plant, coal-based electricity.
Yeah.
So yes, things are happening. Electric vehicle is becoming a reality.
Yeah.
Industrial emissions are reducing, efficiency is increasing. But if you put all these things together, they don't add up.
Right.
The
Right.
kind of transformative changes we need to tackle climate change is too big. We need to end fossil fuels in next 20 to 30 years. Think about your life. Today, your house is electrified by electricity from a coal plant or a gas plant. You drive a car which is run on gasoline. You consume produce from industries which are based on fossil fuels. Climate change demands wholesale change in our economic system, particularly those that is related to energy. Now, that kind of changes are not happening.
Yeah. So that definitely uh, requires some kind of local effort, right, to translate these international findings into local policies. And that involves a lot of negotiation between the national government and top industries, whether in India or in any other countries, because these industries are the lifeline of the economy of the country. So we cannot go to those companies and just say, overnight you need to transform into green or eco-friendly um, solutions, and which can mean that the manufacturing labor has to be laid off in 1 day or 1 week or whatever. So how do we can you maybe give a good example of an industry that has smoothly transitioned from fossil fuel based or um, coal based industry to renewable electric or renewable energy based economy?
Unfortunately, no industry has completely transformed towards renewable energy so far. We do see changes happening in electricity sector and transport sector, but as I said, these are the beginning of changes that is going to happen in next 10 to 20 years.
Yeah.
First of all, I think it is important to recognize that these changes are not going to happen overnight. We have time. We have time for the next 2 to 3 decades to take action. So, if we
Yeah.
start planning today, we will be able to reach that goal of ending fossil fuel in the next 2 to 3 decades. So, we don't have to be so scared of this change. Think about our lives in 1990. We
Yeah.
didn't have desktop computers, and the kind of conversation we are doing across the continent right now was unthinkable even 20 years back. So those changes have happened, and therefore ending fossil fuel is a change that can also happen if we plan well, if industries realize that their existence depends on good climatic conditions. Extreme weather event is also going to destroy their businesses. So it is
Yes.
not only about us, it is about everyone. So we have time, we have to start planning and implementing those changes, and it is in benefit of everyone. I do not see any group, even labor, we can reskill and retrain labor and workforce to work in a green industry. All those changes are possible today.
So go ahead, Memona.
No, you do bring a very interesting point, Chandra, about change being slightly slow, excuse me, and methodical. So it's interesting because then the reverse part of the UN climate report and just what experts talk about with climate change and global warming is, the world needs to stay within that 1.5 to avoid 1.5 degrees Celsius global warming, to avoid, economic and social upheaval and catastrophic impacts. The report states that we're currently at 1.1 degrees from pre-industrial levels, and we'll probably get there within 20 years if nothing is done. So in that framework of change, like you described, being methodical, how do you think we can reverse this trend, and if at all it's even possible? And what are some bright spots that we might have experienced so far, so it's not just a doom and gloom story?
So first of all, we will have to slow down the temperature increase. Right now, the temperature increase is extremely rapid, and therefore you are absolutely right. We are likely to hit 1.5 C in the next 10 to 15 years.
Mhm.
So our first goal is to slow down the temperature increase. Then our second goal is to make sure it doesn't exceed 1.5. And our third goal, which is a long-term goal, is to start reversing the temperature increase. It means we should start reducing the temperature increase. Now, all these three goals uh, can only happen if we put in place a transformative action plan, which
Yeah.
means that we start reducing fossil fuel consumption from now onwards. We don't have to stop it, we have to start reducing it. Now, there are bright spots. The bright spot is that renewable energy is now cheaper. Therefore, no one can argue that we have to continue using fossil electricity. Today, you and me can move to solar and wind and geothermal and hydropower, and batteries are becoming cheaper. So storage is also becoming cheaper. So renewable and storage will now allow us in next 10 years, if we want, to close down large coal-based power plants and gas-based power plants. Electric vehicles are becoming important, and they will start outcompeting internal combustion engine, the gasoline vehicles that we run today. Those are extremely inefficient technology. Electricity is efficient, they are pollution free, they are noise free, they are comfortable, and they're cheaper. So that is a bright spot. In number of industries, it is possible to now move away from fossil fuel boilers. Whether you are looking at textile industry or dairy industry, in all those industry, we can move to biogas or hydrogen or renewable electricity. So there are bright spots. In fact, I would say that technology is not a problem today. If we want to move from fossil fuel to non-fossil fuel, in most sector, we have some or other technology. Of course, we have not deployed them at the scale we would like them to be. So there are bright spots, but those technologies will have to be deployed now. We all will have to start using them.
You raised a great point earlier on when you talked about upskilling and reskilling the workforce. I know one of the controversies that often comes up in that talk about climate change and then shift from coal energy to renewable energy is the number of jobs that will be lost and decades of experiences that have been gained in those industries. So, how would you tackle that transition, especially from a workforce standpoint?
So essentially, I have just come out with a report which talks about just transition. We don't need only energy transition. We need a transition which is just to communities and workers and anyone who is going to get affected by this transition. So the report essentially puts out a five-fold principle for just transition, and I have called it as 5 R's of just transition. The
Okay.
first, restructuring of economy. So communities in the US, for example, coal communities are going to get highly affected, whether they're in Pennsylvania or Rocky Mountains where there are coal mines. You need restructuring of economy on those communities. The second is reskilling and skilling of workforce. People who are working in coal mine, they need to be reskilled. They need to be provided social security. Third is repurposing of infrastructure. Coal and coal-based power plants, they have large amount of asset and land. They need to be repurposed for a green industry. The fifth is revenue substitution. Those communities, those municipalities, those local government earn taxes from these coal and coal-related industries. Those revenues will have to be substituted. And last is responsible social and environmental practices. We should not do this energy transition if we do not want a better world. And therefore, this gives us an opportunity to create a better world than what we have today. So that's the fifth R. So we have to start talking about just transition and not only energy transition to create a better world than what we have today and to solve climate change.
Thank you for sharing the just excerpts on your report. And would you be so kind to share the links to the report at the end so we'll share with our audiences?
Absolutely.
This COP26 meeting, the Conference of Parties meeting, is happening in a little less than 3 months. And of course, world leaders gather, make declarations, talk about how to implement that UN climate change framework. What do you think the focus of the meeting should be, especially in light of the past 18 months that the world has had?
First of all, I want leaders to go to COP26 with open mind and don't go and fight there. This what happens at all the international conferences. There is fight between countries. It almost it becomes very toxic. Developed and developing countries don't agree on things. I think today we all need to agree that there is a common challenge that we all face. Point number one. Point number two, that there are countries with more resources than others. Those who have more resources are more able, should do more and support others. We need a global cooperative mechanism. We do not need to fight now. The challenge of climate change is so big that we need all hands on the deck. That's what is the analogy that I can give you right now. So they should go to COP26, give their best, pledge the best, and try and come out with a global collaborative mechanism rather than creating this fight between developed and developing countries, which hasn't worked for 30 years. And that approach is not going to work for another 30 years either. So I think all hands on deck is what I would expect them to do at COP26.
and 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 once they come back from COP26, that's really the place where we are seeing uh, almost sometimes not much of an action. So perhaps there must be grassroots level push to have these politicians be more accountable for laying out some kind of a plan right after they come from these conferences, uh, to say what is going to be the response, or the next steps after these conferences. Do these currently exist, or do they need to be established?
Unfortunately, the public pressure on government on the issue of climate change is not there across the world. Maybe in few Scandinavian countries, citizens are putting pressure on their government. But in developing countries or even in the US, you do see in the US
Yeah,
voices there, but the majority of voice is not pushing the
yeah,
government to do more on in many European countries.
yeah,
So, unfortunately, despite everything that we all are experiencing today, people are dying. In Greece, for example, if you see today, the wildfire has killed people. In Italy, it has killed. In China, the floods have killed people. In
yeah,
India, we had a devastating flood just a few weeks back in western part, which killed tens and hundreds of people. So people are dying now. But unfortunately, the local issues are far more important in today's politics than issues like climate change. And that I think is something we all need to work. People like me, people like you, this program, where we need to tell the general citizen that climate change is too important to ignore for
definitely.
our own good. Leave our children, leave our grandchildren. We are going to get impacted first. Okay, so
Yeah.
it's too important. We need to build political momentum, public pressure to make this change happen.
Chandra Bhushan, could you talk a little bit about your organization, iFOREST, and also the non-governmental organizations' responsibility towards pushing these agendas?
Well, iForest was set up in 2019 to essentially bring innovation in the field of environment.
Okay.
Uh, we realize that a lot of work that is happening in the field of environment is top down.
Okay.
Essentially, we try and get things done without the consensus and participation of people, and therefore we are not seeing the change that we would like to see.
Yeah.
So iForest essentially was set up to bring innovation and bottom-up action in the field of environment. For example, instead of working at the union government level in India, we prefer working with local government and regional governments
Okay.
so that we can build consensus, we can build support at the local level, increase awareness at the local level so that we can see changes that we would like to see. And we work on a wide array of environmental issues. Of course, energy and climate change is an important part of our work,
Yeah.
but we also work on pollution and waste management. We work on green economy.
Okay.
Essentially, if you want to see change to happen, you will have to move money towards green investments
Absolutely.
and move them away from brown and black, dirty investment that is
Right.
there. So we need to move investment towards green the investment, and we have a program on the green economy. And lastly, we have a program on natural resource management,
Awesome.
which looks at forests and water and rivers and ponds and lakes and wetlands. How do we preserve important ecological systems is our fourth program. So this is broadly what we do. And we are a non-profit organization, as you rightly said. Uh, we we work, our resources are largely from donations and contribution from government and foundations.
Sure.
And this is how we work. And we think it is our responsibility to move, the society towards sustainable practices. That's what
Absolutely.
we think is our responsibility.
Chandra Bhushan, I am also originally from India, and we see a lot of students who might be interested in environmental issues, but the pressure in the families or for them to pursue maybe technology or maybe other industries that improve their money getting rather than improving the environment or improving the state of the country. And I think that's I can copy paste this to other countries as well. So how would we encourage more local entrepreneurship, more students, more scholarship in the field of environmental innovation?
So first of all, we need to first of all expand the field of environment itself.
Hmm.
If we want to solve this big environmental problem, and please understand,
Yeah,
climate change is not the only environmental problem that we are
yeah,
facing.
sure.
We are decimating biodiversity. In fact, scientists are now saying that the Earth might witness the sixth mass extinction of species. The fifth one was when dinosaurs died. So we
Yes,
are decimating wildlife as well. And then we have problem in our nitrogen cycle, waste management. So there are multiple environmental problems that the world is facing.
yes,
Now we need to expand the field itself. So
yeah,
there is need for environmental in even software industry.
yeah, yeah,
Information technology also needs to provide solution for the environmental field. We need environmentalists even in the steel making.
yeah,
Currently, steel making is polluting. We need a lot of environmental engineers and planners and technologists to work in the steel sector.
sure,
Every sector of the economy,
sure,
the kind of challenge we face will require environmental specialization, and general people should be responsible about environment. So one, expand environment. Those who are passionate about environment should join, because like any profession, environment is also a profession. You do not expect, I do not like people to come to the field of environment as do-gooders only. We
okay,
all have lives, we have families, we need to feed ourselves, we
sure,
need jobs, we need money. That's a reality. So I also do not want to, make environmentalists as only do-gooders. I'm
yeah,
actually quite scared of people who think that they are do-gooders.
okay,
Okay, they, they,
yes,
they do more damage. They do more damage than good. So I think we have to be professional about this field. Uh, we all have to work together. This field have to be expanded. More people will have to join this movement and work professionally. And we need leaders who will, in politics, who will champion environmental issues. So I see environmental field as more as a professional field than as a do-gooder field. I don't think do-gooder is going to get us anywhere.
thanks for dispelling that.
Yeah, that's definitely an interesting spin to the issues of the environment. You had given a TED talk sometime in 2019, and it was titled "An Opportunity in the Climate Crisis: Energy 5.0." Could you just shed light or summarize that talk for our audience?
So essentially, that talk talks about the future of energy itself, and the future of energy is going to be decentralized. It will be driven by prosumers. The electricity grid will be like internet grid, and we all can buy and sell electricity. And it will be a world of watts and not kilowatts.
Hmm.
Our energy system is extremely inefficient. but we can convert that energy system into a super efficient system. And we see that change happening. My parents used, incandescent bulb, which required 60 and 100 watts of electricity. I light my house with an LED bulb, which takes 6 watts. Okay. Uh, 10 years back, 15 years back, air conditioning were, giving us cooling at the rate of 1 watt per watt. Today, we get cooling of 7 watt cooling for 1 watt input of electricity. So we have made our air conditioner 7 times more efficient.
Yeah.
So the future of energy system is going to be of watts and not kilowatts. We all can become prosumers, producers and consumers. Our houses can have solar, and if we have excess electricity, we can sell. If we have deficit, we can buy. And electricity grid will be like a super information highway, which is what internet is, not controlled by one person,
Yeah.
but where millions of people can feed electricity, consume electricity, share information in real time. So this is what the future of energy is going to look like. The current energy system we have was developed in early 20th century, which is centralized. It doesn't go well with renewable energy.
Yeah.
Renewable energy demands super efficiency and decentralization. Coal requires centralization, and as much as you can consume society. So that's what my TED talk was, and in fact, I gave it in 2019. I have a much more refined version of that I'm preparing right now.
Interesting. So, what role do you think artificial intelligence and blockchain technology would play in this Energy 5.0 you just described?
Absolutely. If you are looking at a smart electricity system, it is beyond human capability to manage the kind of information that will flow in that system, or manage the flow of electrons.
Yeah.
That will happen in small quantities from every household, for example. Okay. So this will be run by artificial intelligence. The information flow and electron flow will be done by artificial intelligence. Blockchain will play a major role in. Okay, you and me can exchange electrons, and that can be put under in a blockchain ledger. So information, the modern information technology, and Internet of Things, blockchain, AI, they all are going to get integrated in this energy system that we see in the future. I just want to add here, we all should ponder about this issue. Since the advent of fire, the only way we get energy is by burning something. Think about it. Okay.
Yeah.
We want electricity, we burn coal. We run our car, we burn gasoline in our vehicle. We want to cook food, we burn LPG, gas in our kitchen. So humans have been burning things for getting energy. But the future of energy is electrons. We need to directly produce electron to run our car, to cook our food, to light our houses, and to run our factories. That's the future we have to look at. And therefore, the coming energy system will be something which will be a perfect break from our ancient burning technology. This is what we have done so far. Okay. So that's the future of energy we all should be looking at.
Sure. Absolutely.
Interesting. Very interesting analogy. I think, lastly, before I hand over to Ashwin, is actually two questions quickly. You speak about the future and the technology, but we all know that currently the disparities exist with even access to the internet, let alone Internet of Things and artificial intelligence. So how do you think we would be able to address those inequities that might arise, or those disparities, as we look at the future of energy?
See, I very strongly believe that inequality is also because people do not have economic freedom across the world. In my part of the world, government controls are too many. And poor people have to go through enormous amount of drudgery to get even basic things, whether it is water or sanitation or housing or electricity or internet. I believe that one of the causes of inequality is that we still are not economically free in terms of what we want to do. That's one. So unlike people who will say that you need government to step in and help people, I believe that the time has come where government has to step out as far as economic system is concerned. We spend huge amount of money getting government clearances, okay, and government control is just too
No.
much. I think government role is to support society, not to control society. Okay, that's the way we need to move ahead. And therefore, if we in developing world we keep talking about strong government, then I think we will continue to see inequality of the scale that we are seeing right now. Okay, we need to talk about supportive government, benevolent government, government that allows people to fulfill their full potential. Now, that's the kind of political system and economic system we need. Once we have that, I am quite sure people can fend themselves. No one is poor because they don't work. In fact, poor people work the hardest to get the basic thing. We need to make sure that their hard work gets converted into real wages, good money, and basics of life. This is what we need to ensure. So my answer to inequality is not more government and government support, rather less government, economic freedom, and political freedom. This is what I look at.
That's really insightful. My next question, you had previously mentioned, environmentalists shouldn't, you are wary of people who the do-gooders in the environmental field. But as an environmentalist, what inspires you and your work?
Well, what inspires me is to, well, frankly speaking, what inspires me is to make sure that the community I live in, the country I live in, is better off. It inspires me a lot that if I'm able to contribute through my profession, I'm able to do things better, to improve things, to make people's life better. And that is the goal of every field. It is not the field of only environment field. A software engineer should also think what his or her work is contributing to. Ultimately, if we all think about if our work is contributing to make the society better, our lives better, and society better, we will have a better world. So I don't think that my aspiration and inspiration is any different than inspiration of people who are thinking about society in other fields. Uh, 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 and therefore, I do think about the bigger picture of my work, that what I'm contributing to, and that keeps inspiring me.
Chandra Bhushan, I have a scenario question for you. So, let's say I am a pharmaceutical company in India, and I know that the industry, to manufacture 1 kilogram of pharmaceutical active ingredient, up to some reports say that up to 1,000 kilos of waste is generated. For me to move from what I'm currently doing, using fossil fuel, to going to renewable energy, means that in the short term, my bottom line is going to be affected. So, what is the step I need to take to ensure that my bottom line is not affected, and at the same time I'm moving? Because if I move, doesn't mean that the industry is moving. So, for me to take that bold action, uh, what is my incentive?
So I do divide industry in two parts. One are leaders who will move the industry. Others are followers who will move with the industry. So there are two things. Uh, and those who are leaders in industry redefine the industry, create new values, both economically as well as societal values, and move ahead. I do believe that if you have a good product, and if you are caring for the environment, then economically you should not suffer in even the medium term, leave long term. Now, if you are thinking only about your next quarter return, maybe then it is a very difficult decision to make. But if you are talking about next 6 or 8 or 10 quarter result, then maybe it is not a difficult decision to make, because I am yet to find an environmental work which does not pays you back either in terms of hard cash, or in terms of societal goodwill, or in terms of less government interference, or in terms of more consumer base. So
Correct.
the benefit of environment is not only hard cash, it is also about your reputation, your consumer confidence in you, and the social reputation that you get. Now you will have, there are a lot of intangibles here, but
Sure.
as you and me know, intangibles matter.
Right.
Intangibles is what creates the value of a company, not only how much profit you're making.
Yeah.
So I think my request and my recommendation to industry has always been, look at the big picture.
Yeah.
Okay. Don't only look at one quarter result to decide whether environmental investment is good or bad. That is itself a bad decision making process.
Right.
Okay. That's a bad way of looking at environment.
What is the new responsibility that high income countries have in the planet? Because until now, the high income countries became high income countries because of fossil fuels. Now they have moved on to green economy, and they have moved transported all their fossil fuel industries to low and middle income countries, and high income countries are benefiting because of that, which is in turn affecting the climate. It's still high income countries indirectly are still affecting the climate in that way. What is their new responsibility now?
So I think there are two things. One, high income countries and rich people in low income countries. Okay. They both are same.
Yeah.
Okay. And the similarity is consumption. Okay.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, they just consume too many things and too much, which is unsustainable. The planet cannot sustain that kind of consumption. But I
Sure.
just want to give you what has happened over the last 18 months with me.
Okay.
Now, in a month back, I started looking at my expenditure in my household over the last few years. And annually, I used to buy at least half a dozen of pants and shirts.
Hmm.
I'm
Sure.
not a big spender, but in a year I used to do that.
Sure.
Okay, and maybe a pair or two of shoes.
Sure.
During COVID, I have not bought even a single thing.
Yeah.
Okay, and it has not affected my life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I'm comfortable. I'm speaking to you. I'm also going out now.
Yeah.
Which tells me that my previous consumption behavior
Yeah.
was essentially not required. The same pants and shirts and shoes I can keep using them for a longer period, which I never did. Okay.
Right.
So I think people have to learn during this COVID period. I think people should reflect back on their consumption pattern, the kind
Right.
of things we buy which is not required. Okay.
Yeah.
I believe that 70 to 80% of non-food things that we buy are actually non-essential. We can live without it. If we all start doing that, okay,
Yeah.
I think some of the major environmental issues that we face, maybe we will not have to worry too much about them.
So you meet with. Thank you for that insights. And it's a matter of being also disciplined after the economy opens back.
Yes, yes.
Yes. So, what you meet with stakeholders from multiple industries, and what are some leadership and negotiation lessons that you can share with our young professionals watching the program?
In my life, I find in all these negotiation and discussion, I think people are very pretentious.
Yeah.
Okay. And that is a problem. Okay. If you are honest, you will get good honest partner. Okay.
Yeah.
If you are hiding information, you're non-transparent, you are pretentious, you are trying for one-upmanship, maybe you will gain in short term, but you will lose in long term. And therefore, my leadership advice, unlike everyone else who thinks leaders should be, should have a different face than that person actually has. Okay, this is what leadership advice is. Mine is quite the opposite. Be yourself. Okay,
Yeah.
be honest, transparent. You are going to get good friends. You are going to get good partners. You will make good deals. Okay, and this is what we need in a society. Our problem is not that we are not good people, but we are taught to be not who we are.
Yeah.
Okay, that is a fundamental problem that we have in the society. In a school, we are taught that more money you make, the more successful we are. That's the first thing my teacher taught me. If you get educated, you are going to get good job and you will get more money. Okay,
Right.
my
Right.
teacher never taught me, despite everything, that if you get educated, you can contribute to the society, which is good.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
be yourself. I think that's the best leadership advice I can give it to you. Okay, be
Got it.
yourself, honest and transparent.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for that. And we have a audience question here. So,
Mhm.
if climate change carries on, Aisha asks, what will happen? What will the world look like in say 50 to 100 years?
We don't have to go to 50 to 100 years. If the kind of climate change that is happening right now, we can see in next 20 years, it will be devastating. Things like wildfire that you see in California will become very common and much more extensive. Floods will become very common. Our infrastructure will not be able to sustain that kind of extreme weather events, heat waves. Canada had 52 degrees temperature, or Italy, for example, had 48 degrees, which are
Yeah.
unheard of temperature
Unheard
in
of.
Europe
Yeah.
and North America. Those are going to become very, very common. Outdoor work, for example, will become very difficult for a month or multiple weeks in a year. So all the scenarios that you see, you see devastation in the economy, in the lives and livelihoods. It will become a pretty hostile place to live for most people, even rich. I just read a news article which said that some of the richest people lost their homes in California fire.
Yeah.
So, you could have $1 million home, but you can't save them. Okay. So, rich or poor, developed or developing country, everyone is going to suffer if we are not able to control it.
Thank you. That's insightful. So, Chandra Bhushan, who is your role model, whether within the field of environment or outside?
Well, I have many role models. I do see good things in a lot of people. Okay, but I also recognize that good thing in a person doesn't mean that the person doesn't have weakness. Okay, so from that perspective, I don't idealize everything in an individual. Okay, I
Sure.
don't make them God. My God is my God. Okay,
Sure.
so I do see extremely good things in leaders like Gandhi and Nehru.
Sure.
But I also see Mandela as an inspirational figure in terms of bringing communities together. Uh, I do see, Barack Obama as an inspirational young leader who wanted to do many things but couldn't do. I also see where he failed, but I also have huge respect for him. I see the Poland labor leader Les Walesa as a great inspirational figure. So from writers to musician to political leaders, uh, I follow, and there are many inspirational figure for me,
Sure.
not one.
Sure. Thank you so much, Chandra Bhushan. This has been quite a insightful conversation, and you have dispelled minimum of 5 to 10 myths that I was holding truth. And this has been such a clarifying conversation. And I encourage our audience to go. We will share the link to the 5R report that recently Chandra Bhushan has co-authored. So we will be sharing that right after this program. But thank you so much for your time today, Chandra Bhushan. This has been a wonderful conversation. We look forward to having you once again in the program.
Thank you very much. My pleasure, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you.